Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you. Welcome. Hey, it's a good crowd when all you say is welcome and you get some sort of applause. But that is the kind of event we want today. So this afternoon, our event entitled Celebrate Ideas Worth Spreading is part of Staff Appreciation Week, which we have activities all week long. This year marks the 28th year that the campus is taking time out to celebrate staff, and this is the first year that we've expanded to an entire week's worth of activities. So before we really get started, a couple quick thank yous to note. Please join me in thanking Assistant Vice Chancellor Janine Raymond for sponsoring Staff Appreciation Week and all the many staff members who worked on the various planning committee, the sub-planning committee, the sub-planning committee to bring all these things to you. Please join me in thanking them really quickly. And then before I go any further, I actually have to take a special second out and thank these two people right here, haha, surprise, who've been instrumental in getting today ready and done. So Jojo Lamb, Jenny Olmedo, really inspirational in getting the speakers, getting everything organized. So without them, this couldn't have happened. So housekeeping note, restrooms are down the hallway this way by the stairs. If you need to, there is the restrooms. We'll be taking a pause between each speaker for restroom break or cookies and juice. And then just to give a background for this, the idea for this event, this morning we spent some time on developing staff, looking at career development, and we heard some really inspirational career stories from staff and how they make a difference on campus and how their contribution helps the campus fulfill its mission. This afternoon, we're celebrating those great contributions. We're celebrating those passions. We're celebrating those ideas. And the event entitled Celebrate Ideas Worth Spreading. So the idea is these are fantastic thoughts you will hear. Hopefully they will change your attitudes, change your perspectives, and in turn change the campus and change the world. So with that, I'm going to give it to Jojo to introduce our first speaker, and we'll get started.
Our first speaker is Ina Dishler. I heard applause. Go for it. She's a strategic professional development specialist in learning and organizational development. And she has 25 years of professional experience doing this sort of work, 12 years here at UC Berkeley. You might be familiar with her programs, including Leadership Development Program. And she is also working on our Advisor Development Project. We are very excited to hear her speak today about learning agility and how we can build our very own learning agility muscles. Welcome, Inette.
Thanks, Jojo.
Feel good? Do you want that?
No.
Okay. And your mic is on?
I'm on. Thank you. So good afternoon. I'm so glad to see some people in the room. I don't know how many people are in our streaming audience, but I was hoping to have at least some live bodies in front of me. So thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. So when we were having planning meetings about today and what we're trying to accomplish with this day and ways to help staff to think about their own careers and how to develop themselves and the competencies and skills that are required to be successful, I offered this topic as something that staff might find useful, and they took me up on it. So I'm here to talk to you today about learning agility. So how many people here want to be successful in your jobs? Fantastic. It's great to see every hand going up, and I'm going to trust that in our streaming audience, you're all raising your hand too. Well, current research shows that one of the essential competencies for success in the 21st century in work is learning agility. So this is a concept that you may or may not be familiar with, but I'm here to introduce it to you today. So what is learning agility? Learning agility is the ability and the willingness to learn from experience and subsequently apply that learning to perform successfully under new or first-time conditions. So if we unpack that definition a little bit to the key words that are highlighted on the slide, the ability and willingness both to learn, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. to learn from your experiences. But learning in and of itself is not enough. You have to reflect on that learning and be able to apply it to the work that you're doing for it to really have value. And then to be able to perform successfully under new conditions. So we all know that the university is changing rapidly, it's changing daily, and that brings with it new systems, new processes, new procedures, new operating principles, all kinds of new things that we have to constantly be adapting to and to learn and to work with. And so learning agility is part of being able to make those adaptations in real time, in a quick way, from a variety of experiences that you've had and bringing them to present-day reality. So there are 3 different components of learning agility that include cognitive abilities, personality characteristics, and motivation. And when we talk about cognitive abilities, we're referring to things like being insightful and analytical, able to see things from a variety of perspectives. So widening your own lens from how you might typically or normally see the world. In terms of personality characteristics, this includes things like being open to new experiences, having a curious mindset and view of the world, adapting thinking and behavior in response to emerging situations. So we talked about right now, there's a lot of new things emerging in our own environment, and having an attitude that is really open to that. Being committed to your personal growth, like everybody having a development plan that you're actively working on and changing it as necessary. Believing in your own ability to learn to lead well, being courageous to take risks, and confident enough to handle setbacks in stride. And then motivation is having that desire to learn and to improve. So there are some critical elements to learning agility that are a rock-solid commitment to learning. I know some of you may work in the Haas School of Business. Maybe we have some people from Haas on our streaming audience. And Haas has some principles that apply to all of its faculty, students, and staff. And I love their principles. One of them is students always. And I love that because what that says is we are in a learning environment here. This is an academic institution. It's all about learning. We tend to think about that for the students. But in reality, it should be about all of us. Everybody who's a member of this community should be in a continuous learning mode all the time. Another element is to put yourself in challenging situations. So as Jojo said in my introduction, I run the Campus Leadership Development Program, LDP, and something that I say all the time to LDPers throughout the 13 months of that program is to stretch yourself, to go outside of your comfort zone, to try on new things, to take on new tasks, volunteer for assignments that are going to build new skills, that are going to stretch you in new directions. And another element is to be relentless in seeking and accepting feedback about your performance. So this means going beyond the once-a-year performance review conversation that you hopefully have every year with your manager, where they come to you to give you feedback. This is going beyond that and actually going and asking for feedback. And not just from your manager, although of course you would want that feedback, but going beyond that to talk to all the people that you work with on a regular basis. So that would be your coworkers, that would be customers, that might be people that you work with across campus and other departments. So seeking feedback from people, especially people that you respect, that you would trust that they have your best interests at heart, that their intention is to help you be a better version of yourself. So actively seeking out that kind of feedback and then being able to apply it is another critical element of learning agility. So there are some things that are considered enablers, some behaviors that if you're doing them, they are helping to promote learning agility for you. And that includes innovating. We actually have an operating principle about innovating now, but this is about not being afraid to challenge the status quo, to not just accept that the way things are done is the best way to do them, but to really look at, is there a new way, are there new and better ways to do things, and being willing to challenge, to ask questions, to explore new possibilities. Performing is another enabler, which is about overcoming an unfamiliar situation or a challenge and still doing your best work. So with all the things that are changing in our environment all the time, all the new learning that you have to do, to still be able to be a high performer in spite of all of that. reflecting is a key to learning. So all of you are capable of learning. You can sit here today and you can learn about what I'm talking about learning agility. You can take good notes. But you have to go to the next step beyond just taking in information to actually reflecting on what you're learning and how you can put it to use. That is really the difference that makes you learning agile. So not just being a learner, but being learning agile. That's really the goal. So how do you reflect on your learning? In all the classes that I teach, in the KEYS program, in LDP, or in other classes that I teach on campus, I'm always talking to people about how are you going to apply what you're learning. That's what's really critical here, is to bring it to fruition somehow in the work that you do. So in LDP, for instance, one of the strategies that we use for reflection is journaling. So in the beginning of the program, I hand out a journal to each person, each participant in the program, and then I give them guided questions every time we meet to do some journaling on right then, to help them reflect on what they're learning, what experiences they're having in the program. That's something you can do for yourself all of the time. There's another practice called AARs, After Action Review. This is a common practice in the military, and we try to bring it into project settings where when you've been working on a project, that then you sit down and you do a debrief on the learnings from that project. So not just what you actually accomplished or produced as a result of that work, but what did you learn? And how would you do things the same, or how would you do things differently the next time around? Do you have a way to process that? Do you document it somehow? So those kinds of activities help with reflection. Risking is another enabler that is about purposely putting yourself out there. So as I said, stretching yourself. Always looking for those opportunities to raise your hand and say, you know, I'll try that. It's really new for me, but I'm willing to take a risk and go out there and try something new, because that's how I'm going to grow the most. Now, this notion of not defending is, I put it on here on this list of enablers, but really what's true about this is that defending is a derailer. So I'm trying to spin it around to say not defending is an enabler, but what's really the key point here is that if you are defensive about the feedback that you receive, then that is going to get in your way. That is a derailer for you being learning agile or being able to apply your learning. So you want to be open and accept feedback and take time to think about it, reflect on it. Is it consistent with other feedback that you've gotten over time or from other sources? And what do you need to do about it? How motivated are you to do something with the feedback that you've gotten? So there are some learning agile traits that come from research that's been done about this. And in general, people who are considered learning agile are more extroverted, more original, more focused, more resilient, and less accommodating. So see how many of those apply to you. You can do some reflecting as we go along here. So there is a map of learning agility that talks about there are 4 different areas in which we can be learning agile. So the first one is people agility. And that includes yourself. So this is about having self-awareness first and foremost, to know yourself, to know where are your opportunities for growth, for continuous improvement, for development, for building your skills, for reaching out and stretching in new ways. So self-awareness is the first aspect of people agility. But then, of course, we're also talking about dealing with other people, and in this case, dealing with a wide variety of other people. We work with all kinds of different people in this very large and complex organization. So people agility is building your ability to work with people who are different from you in all kinds of ways. It's also having political astuteness, to be able to work effectively in different kinds of environments and having that political acumen, to read the room, to read the environment, to understand the situation and know best how to maneuver through it, and then to be a skilled communicator. And this is in all modalities of communication, writing and speaking, to have good presentation skills. So all of those things have to do with people agility. The next kind of agility is mental agility. So this is about expanding your thinking skills. And there are different kinds of thinking skills. So there are critical or analytical thinking skills, and you can actually build those skills, that skill set in yourself. And there's also creative thinking skills. So it's really about having both of those kind of thinking abilities and expanding on them, both the critical and the creative kind of thinking skills so that you can apply them in any situation that you find yourself in. It's also about finding solutions to tough problems. So you might run up against something over and over and over, and maybe you keep trying to solve it in the same way, but you keep getting the same results. It's not working. And so you've got to be able to think in a very different kind of way, go outside of those parameters that you've established and how you would normally look at something to say, what's a totally different approach I can take to this? How can we solve this in some new way? Because what we've been trying isn't working. We have to do something very different. Having mental agility is about being curious. And part of curiosity is reading. So reading widely, exposing yourself to a lot of different ideas, a lot of different ways of thinking about things helps to build that muscle. But having an open and curious attitude towards the world is really an enabler of learning agility. In terms of results agility, that's the next kind of agility. This has to do with things like taking on resistance that you might come across, and you have an idea you want to try, you have something new you want to propose. People might have an immediate reaction that's negative to that just because we get in our comfort zone about things and we like what we're used to and we like what's familiar. So you might put something out there and get pushback on it right away. It's being able to take that resistance and just use your influencing skills and keep massaging that idea, working with those people, with your people ability, your people agility skills, to get them to open up and be more interested and more inclined to pursue this idea with you. It's looking at new slants, as I said, new ways of thinking about things. Drive is a key part of results agility. So are you driven to achieve results in your own work? It's a question you can think about for yourself. Are you results focused? We're right now really looking at our whole performance management approach and trying to think about how can we make changes to the performance evaluation form itself, but also to how we talk about performance management in this organization to focus more on results. What are you really achieving? So it's not about just busy work and doing things all the time, but it's are you doing the right things? Do you know what the right things are? So with good results agility, you're very cued in to what the right things are, the best places to put your effort, your energy, your attention, and your time. And you're working on those key things and you're achieving good results. Results agility also has to do with confidence building. So in yourself, by trying things out and having your little wins, and then you're building confidence over time that helps you to take on new challenges and new risks, and also to help other people build their confidence. And then to build and inspire high-performing teams. Now, some people are very focused on team building, and they do a lot of things that are fun and engaging and get teams to work together well. But what we're really talking about is not just teams that like each other or that are necessarily cohesive, but teams that are really high-performing teams. And that's something we're looking for in terms of results agility. And then the last kind of agility is about change agility. And we've already established that we're in a very, very change-intensive environment, certainly over the past few years. So change agility has to do with your own adaptability and your flexibility to all that change. And it's not just absorbing all the changes and reacting and adapting to them, but it's also actually being a change agent. Change agility is really about leading change. It's about being the person out ahead of the change. So are you seen as a change agent in your own organization? This also has to do with beating the odds and being resourceful. Again, as we're going to bump up against different obstacles that are in our way, then what can you do to be resourceful to work around them? I have a great example that we just encountered an hour ago. So here we are having this great day devoted to career development. And we had technical and communication glitches right from the get-go this morning where the key websites that had all our information about today's events were down. And we didn't have a way to quickly get communication out to all of you to let you know the details of where things were happening and when, and you couldn't go to the website to look it up. So a few of us were in this room about 2 hours ago, and we just started reaching out to our own networks of people and asking them to get things sent out and forwarding emails. And so very quickly we had emails out through the whole Council of Staff organizations, through BSA, through different people that we knew, and had forwards going all over the place. So that's probably how some of you got here, because in the past hour you got one of those emails. So it's that kind of being resourceful and just working around whatever obstacles confront you, not just giving up because something gets in your way. And this notion of just never being satisfied. You always want to make things better. It's being a natural improver, having those instincts for improving. And then being comfortable with complexity. This is a very complex organization, and in the middle of a lot of change, there's a lot of ambiguity that goes with that. And so what's your tolerance for ambiguity? People who have good change agility have a high tolerance for those kinds of changes and the ambiguity that goes with it. So there's some research by an organization called PDI, Personnel Decisions International, and they have what they call a development pipeline, and I really like this framework for your own learning and for your own development. And it has these 5 aspects to this pipeline. And the first one is insight. Do you know what it is that you need to develop? You personally, for yourself, for your own goals, for your own effectiveness in your current role, to be a high performer, do you know what those things are? Do you know the critical skill sets that the university is going to require 5 years from now? Not just what you need to know today. What do you need to know 5 years from now so that you are actively engaged in building those skills for yourself to be ready as the environment is changing constantly around us? So having that insight is the first dimension of development. The next is then motivation. You might know exactly what you need to do, or what you need to learn, or what competencies you need to grow, but how motivated are you to do the work to do that? So you've got to invest your own time and effort. You own your own development. Each of us individually owns our own development. It's not our boss's job to develop us. It's not the organization's job to develop us. It's our boss's job to support our development. It's the organization's job to give us resources towards our development, but you own your own development. And so how willing are you to invest the work that it takes, the effort, the energy to pursue learning these new skills and competencies that are going to make you a more effective producer in this organization? The third dimension is capabilities. Do you have the skills and knowledge required for success? So, this goes back to the insight. Do you know what you need to develop? And, of the things that are so critical for success in your role, how much of that do you currently have? How much of that do you need to go out and develop for yourself? And then there's real world practice. This goes back to the notion of application of learning. So it's not enough to just go learn something. You can go take an extension class that we offer now for free, and a whole wide variety of classes that you can go take. But those might be interesting. You might learn a lot, but what are you doing with that information? So real world practice is really taking it back, creating opportunities and finding opportunities for you to then apply that learning and use your new skills in real world ways. And then the final aspect of this pipeline is accountability. So do you feel accountable to actually use all the capabilities that you have in the work that you do every day? You may or may not be held accountable by somebody else, but do you have that accountability for yourself? So for each of these conditions of learning, there are strategies for how to develop them or think about them. So the first, again, being insight. Some ways to get that insight are things like getting 360-degree feedback. So some of you probably get this feedback or have had opportunities in your job here to get feedback from a variety of sources. Some departments formally do 360 processes and some don't. But the idea is that you reach out and you get feedback from all the people around you, everybody that you work with, so that your feedback is not only coming from your manager. Your manager might have actually limited insights into what you do every day, because they have a whole scope of responsibilities and they might not really get to see you do your job on a regular basis. So who are the other people that you're working with? Do you have direct reports? You have peers, you have colleagues, you have customers, you have all kinds of people that you interact with. Maybe you serve on committees with people, you're on project teams, and you can get feedback from all those sources. So that's what we mean by 360 feedback. Competency models is another way to gain insight. So there are standard competency models. We have one for our campus. We have our core competencies, right? So there's the 10 competencies that each of us is evaluated on an annual basis. So that gives you some indicators of things that you need to focus on and be good at. But there are also other competency models that exist in the world for different roles. So there's competencies for being a manager. There are competencies for being a leader, for instance. So in the kind of work that you do you know what the core competencies are that would make you an effective performer? Clarifying your goals and your values is another kind of insight to have. It's really important that you have some consonance with your personal values and the values of the organization. That when your values are in conflict with the organization's values, when there's some difference there, that creates a lot of internal conflict for you. It's not a pleasant kind of working situation. That's when you really don't want to wake up and come to work every day. You feel that conflict. So we really want people to have that nice link between your personal values and the values of your organization and the work that your department is doing. If you're not clear on what your own goals are and your career goals, then we have resources over at the UHS Career Center, and classes and workshops and counseling and assessments that you can do to help you think about your goals. We also have a whole online career guide that takes you through a number of different assessments and activities to think about your own goals and your own values related to your career. In terms of capabilities, ways to build capabilities, of course, training is one way to build capability. So if there's a particular skill set that you're looking to build, then you can take training classes to do that. But there's other ways to develop capability, like mentoring, like internships, like shadowing people, like taking on new projects and stretch assignments, those kinds of things. In terms of practice, then I said application is key. So you want to then look for those opportunities where you get to apply things that you're learning through stretch assignments or special projects. And then again, this accountability piece. You're looking for how are you going to measure your own effectiveness moving yourself along your own development path. So learning agility is a key indicator of potential. So if you are someone that wants to be thought of by your managers, by the leaders in our organization, as a staff member who has potential to move into leadership roles, to serve critical roles in the organization, then they're going to look to see if you are learning agile. That is a critical competency and an indicator of potential. So finally, there's a white paper from the Center for Creative Leadership that they did about, it's called Learning About Learning Agility, and there's a quote that I think is really valuable here. Our focus must shift to finding and developing individuals who are continually able to give up skills, perspectives, and ideas that are no longer relevant and learn new ones that are. Ultimately, our ability to continuously learn and adapt will determine the extent to which we thrive in today's turbulent times. So I wish you luck becoming more learning agile, and I'll take any questions if you have them now.
You have the mic.
The mic?
Jenny is the mic. She's next. Yes. The mic. But you have the mic.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there it is.
So are there any questions?
Questions at all from the audience?
Can we do it in this interview?
All right.
Well, thank you.
Is this not long?
So the question is, do I ever do this presentation to partners on campus? No, you are actually the first audience to get this whole presentation, other than some BSA mentors that I have in the past. And so I'm happy to do that, but we haven't gotten this out there yet. So invite me. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Inette. Graciously donated a Bring Your Own Mug. If you're not familiar with this program, it's an amazing program through the Green Initiative Fund, PGIF, and they have given all of our speakers this gift to thank hard work, dedication that they put into today.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks.
With the tech committee. All right. How many people does it take to get? It's just this one, Devin?
All right, so next up we have Erin Fenley here on her roller skates. You might know her because of them, but today she is going to be focused on something closer to her heart. She is an energy management and communications specialist for UC Berkeley. Here she's focused on getting us at UC Berkeley to use less energy through a behavior change campaign called My Power. She's a graduate of the Design for Sustainability Master of Arts program at Savannah College, and she does something that many of us could probably learn how to do better, which is using graphic design and communication to promote new social norms. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, JoJo. Hello, everyone. All right. Make sure I'm not going to. All right. Thanks so much for coming out. Well, like that old Loretta Lynn song says, I was born a coal miner's daughter. Well, actually, my dad was just had a summer job on a strip mine in Virginia one year while he was in college in the early 1960s. But both my grandfathers were bona fide coal miners. I come from southern Appalachia, which in the minds of most Southerners is a very different place from the South. And in the minds of people in the rest of the country seems to be an even more mysterious place. The Mountain South accent is a bit twangier and sometimes a bit more nasal than the southern drawl of deeper points of Georgia and Alabama. My ancestors came across Europe, across the Atlantic from Ireland and other parts of Western Europe in the mid-1700s. My family is a mix of mostly Irish, a little bit of Scottish, and some Cherokee. They were pioneers and trailblazers in the settlement of the colonial parts of America in mountainous settlements in western North Carolina, East Tennessee, and Southwest Virginia. And as many people who settled these very remote mountainous areas of that time, they ended up staying there, and they're still there. And this beautiful place right here isn't just a gorgeous postcard. It's a place where a lot of people live. It's called Powell Valley, Virginia. It's in Wise County, Virginia. And I actually used to live right about there when I was a little kid. And as the settlers there came to find out later on, there's a lot of coal in them there hills. And this fellow right here, he's my maternal grandfather, Joseph McFall. A lot of people called him Fuzzy. And he was an underground miner from Southwest Virginia, but he mined mostly in Kentucky. He was also a father of 9, a proud member of the United Mine Workers Association, and a sometime moonshiner. I never got to meet him. He died in 1977, the year before I was born, of black lung. Black lung is a disease that's really common in coal workers where coal dust builds up inside the lungs and is unable to be removed by the body. And here's Fuzzy right here when he was in his younger days as a moonshiner. This is a stage photo of some of these great moonshiners up in the mountains. I'm really interested in marketing and behavioral research. Like JoJo said, I'm interested in how design and communications can help promote social norms, and that's part of what I do here at UC Berkeley. And in relation to where I come from, I'm also very interested in cultural stereotypes of the Mountain South and how they've been perpetuated through this country over the past 150 years. So indulge me for just a moment here when I draw a parallel between one of the finest poets of our time, Andre Benjamin of Outkast, and he speaks in one of his songs about how he met a critic one time, and she said, I thought hip-hop was only about guns and alcohol. And he says, no. But yeah, it's that too. And so it's kind of like that. We do have the moonshiners, and we do have the hillbillies, whatever. But it's more than that. And Outkast songs are more than just guns and alcohol. They're also great social commentary as well. So, of course, we're not all hillbillies and rednecks and uneducated and violent people, and I'm sure you guys know this. But however, these stereotypes are very similar to the stereotypes of other minority groups who have been, whose land has been subjugated, or land and natural resources and labor have been subjugated by a majority group. The marketing of the hillbilly has helped to sell the ongoing environmental damage in southern Appalachia. And I'm in marketing, so it's a pretty powerful thing. So I mentioned that both of my grandfathers were coal miners. My paternal grandfather, his name was Charles. He actually worked in surface mining. This is a photo of what modern surface mining looks like. This is called mountaintop removal. And in mountaintop removal, what I've realized as I've been living here in California for the past year and a half is that a lot of people aren't very familiar with this style of mining. And I was invited to come here, I think, mainly because I wear roller skates a lot. And people know about that. But I thought if I'm given a venue to speak for about 18 minutes, I would like to talk about something really near and dear to my heart. Roller derby is very near and dear to my heart, but if you want to find out about roller derby, there's a doubleheader on Saturday in Richmond, and I highly suggest you check it out. But in relation to mountaintop removal, let's see here. Back in the 1950s, my grandfather, he owned a bulldozer, which made him a really great candidate for doing this new type of surface mining, where they would blow up parts of the mountain to reach a coal seam, and then he would push over parts of what was left over, and they would clear out the coal. So that's what he did. And I never got to meet my dad's father either. He died at the very young age of 53 of lung complications and heart complications as well. So my family today is still entwined in coal today. And I see that eventually the entire landscape and culture of my home is changing. And it's happening very, very quickly. My sister and her husband have 2 children, and they live on the land of a reclaimed strip mine. And even through legal reclamation, mountaintop removal mining has damaged around 2,000 miles of streams and could destroy 1.4 million acres of mountaintops and forests by the year 2020. In my niece and nephew's lifetime, I wonder how they'll be able to sustain their lives in an area that's becoming ever more like a moonscape. And just to give you a little bit of perspective of the area that I'm talking about here, this is southern Appalachia. The area in Virginia where I showed you that first slide, Powell Valley, it's in the denser part of right here on the border of Kentucky and Virginia. That's where Wise County, Virginia is. That's my home county. And to date, about 25% of the land in that county has been stripped. 1/4 of the land has been blown away off the tops of the mountains. And it continues. And complicating matters further are the economic and political impact of coal in this part of the world. In the past 10 years, the coal industry has spent about $86 million on political campaigns and lobbying. And in a historically economically depressed region, coal has provided somewhat of a false sense of stability in regards to a false sense of stability and pride in relation to the hard work of the miners for the people. There's a popular catchphrase on the bumper stickers there, besides just this Friends of Coal one, which always gets me. But coal keeps the lights on. My younger brother worked as a boilermaker in the construction of a coal-fired power plant in 2008 to 2010. And he took great pride in his work. He was able to practice his professional trade and help to build this plant. There was a huge outcry in the public about the building of this Dominion coal-fired power plant in Wise County, though, mainly because it produces about coal-fired power plants are responsible for about 33 million tons of mercury pollution per year in the United States. And they're the largest domestic source of federally unregulated mercury pollution. There is a really good documentary by a group called Apple Shop, who documents quite a bit about Appalachia and folkways and various things that are going on, and it's called The Electricity Ferry, and it's actually about the battle to stop that power plant that my brother worked on. It's pretty touching. I highly recommend you check it out. But my brother did get a job out of that. They did put the power plant online. It is burning right now. Although his job was temporary. And that's very typical of the type of work in the area. And he's now looking for work again. So I wanted to share these stories with you because they're what fuel my fire. They're what get me excited to come into work every day. It's why I believe in what I do here at UC Berkeley and why I feel exceptionally fortunate to have ended up here. So you can take the girl out of the mountains, but you can't take the mountains out of the girl. That's what my dad always tells me. And my dad sometimes has to fend off the most conservative folks that he talks to about my job, because being an environmentalist in Appalachia is about as popular as arugula being out of stock at Berkeley Bowl. To many in Southern Appalachia, environmentalism is a vote against jobs and the working man. And jobs in this area are already few and far between. However, mining has eliminated 40,000 jobs, all the while increasing their revenue by 140% in the past 30 years. This has mainly been accomplished through practicing mountaintop removal. This form of mining uses so many fewer workers, but it's also far more environmentally destructive than older forms of mining. So let me give you a brief explanation of how this process works. This is called clearing, where a mountaintop is staked out in order to see, okay, this is where we've discovered coal seams. Then they have to remove all the timber. So that timber is plowed down. Very, very rarely is it actually sold for lumber because of the quick timing of the turnaround of getting the mountain taken care of and exploded, as I'll show you next. So a lot of times the timber is either burned on site or it is poured into valley fills and just poured over. So, and then the next step would be blasting the tops of the mountains off, and it's usually between 500 and 800 feet of elevation that have to be blasted. This is accomplished by using millions of pounds of explosives. That's pretty self-explanatory there. And then you have the digging of the coal, and this machine right here is, it's called a drag line, and a drag line stands about 22 stories high. You can put 24 compact cars inside of its bucket, and you can see, in relation to this tiny red truck down here in the bottom, just how huge it is. These cost about $100 million. However, the coal companies prefer to buy such a piece of machinery because it displaces the need to hire hundreds and hundreds of workers. And then you have a lot of waste left over because you only have a certain seam of coal that's actually what you're going for. So everything else has to be removed and washed out. So any of the overburden, or spoil, as what they call it, gets dumped into the valleys, which is completely legal according to the 2002 Clean Water Act that was changed during the Bush administration, that allows a lot of toxic chemicals and toxic waste to be put into these streams or filled in the streams. The processing of the coal to clean it so that it can actually be weighed is done through, there's a lot of these slurry ponds that end up getting created, and it's coal sludge with a mix of water, coal dust, clay, and a bunch of toxic chemicals like mercury, arsenic, lead, copper, and chromium. And there's one really notorious slurry pond in West Virginia that actually sits right above on a hill, right above an elementary school. And these impoundments are really unstable. It's one of the most horrifying things to imagine that this, I mean, it's a really horrifying thing to see. And then the final process in this is the reclamation of the land, which is what my grandfather, Charles, worked a lot on, which has become a much bigger project today than it ever was in the 1950s. Much, much bigger. Reclamation efforts such as stabilization and revegetation are required for mountaintop removal sites by law. However, it's really hard to build on top of these sites because there's no topsoil, it's very unstable, a lot of times the grass won't even grow, it's just sprayed down with a giant hose filled with hydro seed. So sometimes it stays, sometimes it washes away. Yeah, and then one of the most, one of the largest travesties in my opinion is the reclamation, the so-called reclamation of the streams. This was one of the things that really first caught my eye when I started seeing mountaintop removal, starting to see the forest for the trees in a way. While I was there, is these streams that have taken millions of years to develop within the Appalachian Mountains are then reduced to a straight line running down the edge of a stripped hill. And it's just limestone. I mean, no fish or creatures, no crawdads or anything like that could live in there. Or whatever y'all call them around here, not crawdads, I don't know what they are. So anyway, let me bring this back full circle. I know this is really heavy stuff, but here at UC Berkeley, I work in the Office of Sustainability and with the Energy Office. And much of this work revolves around getting our already extremely engaged campus to save even more energy than we already do through behavior change. And you might have seen some of these stickers, hopefully. Anybody seen them? Yeah, okay, cool. I can get you a bunch of them if you don't have any. So a big charge for our program has been to show our campus that energy isn't free. And in fact, we pay about $17 million a year in electricity costs on this campus. So some large elements of what we do here on campus to visualize energy use, because it is kind of hard to see, is showing real-time energy dashboards. And here's the Berkeley Law Building, for example. You can go to mypower.berkeley.edu to see these, except that it might be down today with all the various complications that have been going on with the internet. We also have a volunteer power agent program, and here's some of our fantastic staff and students that are involved as change agents here at Berkeley. We also do individual building surveys and office energy surveys. We've put up 14,000 reminder stickers just to turn things off throughout the campus. We have a resource center located in 192 Barrows where you can pick up all this cool stuff too. So it's my charge to get the campus pumped up about saving energy. And that's not always the easiest thing because energy is a tough one in the sustainability world, that is. One that feels somewhat intangible. Well, we easily take it for granted just to flip on a switch and the light just magically comes on. We don't see what goes on behind the scenes. We don't see it pile up like trash or puddle like wasted water. You can see the cost of cheap energy in Appalachia, though. Of course, there are many other places in the world where you can see this happening as well. But let me tell you about what I know and what I've seen. Every time I go home, I drive through the mountains to go to my family's house, and I know the contours of the mountains and the curves, and there's no flat horizon there at all. Everything is just twisty, tight curves. So you know what's going to happen when you come around the bend. And sometimes I come around the bend and it's completely changed. The mountain is gone. Just blown, literally blown away, forever, gone. My memories have been changed, altered. And I'm far enough away from this now that it feels really frightening every time I go home. And if you're there all the time, I think it's a little harder to see. It's a little harder to take action because it's happening, it's a chipping away, and it's been going on for 100+ years now. It's harder to see that forest for the tree kind of situation or the demolition of everything. But this is what I think about when I visualize the cost of energy use, and it really breaks my heart. And I hope for a new future in Appalachia, one that pulls folks out of poverty and stops the blasting of contaminants into the air and the tops off of mountains and some of the most biodiverse forests in North America. Jobs in coal production last only as long as there's coal to be mined. So many people in Appalachia are seeing promise in wind energy. And wind farms can employ hundreds of people, local residents during the construction phase, and create many permanent jobs while they're in operation. They can also allow the rest of the mountain to be used for sustainable forestry or gathering of plants to create lots of other new jobs, since jobs are really what these people need. And working here at UC Berkeley, I'm given hope on a regular basis by the amazing research that's being done constantly here. The development of artificial photosynthesis. Did you guys see that article recently? That's just amazing. Printable batteries, printable solar panels, using microbes and sugar to create fuel. This is just every day here. And these kind of technologies, even beyond wind, are so exciting for a cleaner and healthier energy future. They really make coal feel like a thing of the past. But you know what? They're not done blowing up mountains yet. As of tomorrow, these folks here in Neoma, West Virginia, are going to start experiencing mountain blasting 6 days a week for the next year. And you can see their little town. It's a very small town. There's about 150 homes down there, but that's where they live. And they're blowing up the rest of that mountain up there. The estimated amount of explosives that are used in Appalachia on a regular week are equivalent to that of a Hiroshima bomb. My family has been in southern Appalachia for about 8 generations, and they don't really want to leave. And why should people here in California care about mountaintop removal? Well, 50% of our country's energy is still produced by burning coal. And there are 5 plants that are indirectly connected to mountaintop removal on the PG&E grid. They don't purchase mountaintop removal coal, however, they purchase coal from companies that operate mountaintop removal mines in Appalachia. So, I mean, that's a very indirect link, but it is a link. And they're still producing, like I was saying, 33 tons of mercury pollution through coal burning plants and whatnot. I talked to Maria Gano. She's one of the foremost activists against mountaintop removal in West Virginia. And I asked her, in preparation for this talk, what would be the one thing you would want to tell people in California about what they can do? What would be the most valuable thing to stop mountaintop removal or raise awareness? And she said that there's something called the Appalachian Community Health Emergency Act. It's HR 526. And what this bill proposes to do is put a moratorium on mountaintop removal until research can be done on birth defects and other types of illnesses that are going on in southern Appalachia, a lot of cancer and whatnot, just to have studies done to see, is this really impacting people? Because they haven't been done yet. Our Congresswoman here in California, Barbara Lee, is actually a co-sponsor on the bill. And I urge you to write her in support of the bill and also tell others. And finally, just please, 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 don't forget to turn the lights off when you leave the room. Thank you. Okay. Oh yeah.
Thank you, Erin. And we can take a couple questions while they're setting up.
Lost one of these. I'm so excited.
Yes, your thank you gift for donating your time. If we have any questions now, I can pass the mic.
Hear me?
On tens of thousands? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's hard to tell on the various spots, but I agree, it's thousands. I mean, there's no topsoil.
The Appalachian area, the prime area for coal production, for providing coal to most of the East Coast. I'm curious about the region that it furnishes.
Provides most of the coal for the southeast. Also shipped all around or other places in the central part of the country that provide for other places. But yeah, Appalachia has lots of underground mining still, and there's a lot of fracking that's going on now. That's a whole new thing. There's still, from what I hear, there's still enough coal in Appalachia where there's the same amount of coal that's in the mountains right now that has already been mined. But it's much, much harder to get to. So that's why they're doing things like mountaintop removal, mining, or fracking in order to get to it. So fracking is a whole other story. And I was really shocked when I found out that was happening.
What's the consensus on do the locals believe the clean coal campaigns, would you say?
Totally. There's a lot of work that's done in Appalachia, like that sticker that I showed that said Friends of Coal. It's a campaign out of West Virginia that basically talks about clean coal and America's clean coal future, and it's very powerful, and they have lots and lots of money. And that's what's been going on there for the past 150 years. People are being told this is what this area needs because this coal lies there. So it, and we need you to mine it. So it's really hard to talk about it there. I feel like since I've come here, have I been able to articulate my feelings? And I see that I was almost defending coal for a while when or just minding dogs, like, oh, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. But the farther away from it I get, the more I can see. So it's just really hard when you're there, especially when you've been to care. It's really hard when you're there hundreds of years and what's just been going on. Not talking legal part, but just the coal mining and land being taken away from people. Are
there any other jobs around there, or are there any other industries?
Well, I can't say this for certain, but I feel like the second biggest industry is either going to be prisons or healthcare, and then followed by funeral homes.
Wow.
Okay, I guess.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Give her a round of applause.
Thank you.
So next up, Alberto Ledesma. Thank you very, very much for all the work that you've done to be an ally to our undocumented students here at UC Berkeley. Alberto has a very rich history at UC Berkeley, 23 years to include his undergraduate, master's, and PhD, including being a professor, and now he is a writing program coordinator at the Student Learning Center. He's going to take us on a visual journey of his experience using cartooning to transcend disciplinary borders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm very happy to be here today to share with you some of the work that I do. I feel humble in that I know that there's a lot of staff here at Berkeley who could easily be standing up here doing exactly what I'm doing. I think in order to be a successful staff member at Berkeley, you have to be multi-talented. And so obviously we all have talents that we could share. So thank you for allowing me to spend a little time telling you a little bit about the work that I do in cartooning. It's not a work that I was trained in, but one that I use in order to do some social analysis. And so I wanted to start first. I know that there's the Worldwide Developers Conference happening in San Francisco with Macintosh. And I was wondering, what if they can make an app or a gadget to allow you to understand what it felt like to be undocumented? It doesn't exist, right? But I think through cartoons, you do get a little bit of that. And so that's what I'm here to share with you, because I think cartoons are an illustration, no pun intended, of how you can transcend disciplinary borders. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I grew up in East Oakland. My father brought my mother and my sisters and I in 1974 to East Oakland from Mexico. We came as undocumented immigrants. And so I lived in East Oakland for 12 years in this little house, undocumented. And during those 12 years, I experienced a conditioning that was profound, a conditioning in terms of the way that I interacted with the world. Undocumented epistemology, the way we know the world, is that every day you're looking over your shoulder thinking you're going to be caught. And so a lot of the work that I did, actually, I wrote some fiction where I would focus on what that felt like, right? And so there's some stories that I've written here. I don't know if you see the family in the back of a car, trying to demonstrate that it's not just that moment that that you experience a fear. It remains with you throughout your time, as long as you're undocumented, right? I try to look at Chicano history also through that lens. So here I have a cartoon that I did where it's a parody of a Cesar Chavez poster. I don't know how many of you have seen this Cesar Chavez poster, where he's leading Farm Worker Union, and he's at the head of this movement. And I always thought, what if the person at the head of that movement was undocumented? And I always thought, that was a difficult, place to be. What being undocumented meant was always being scared. And what students do, I work with a lot of undocumented students right now at Berkeley, both in my capacity working at the Student Learning Center, but also in the past I was part of the Immigrant Students Issues Coalition. We got to learn about their experiences, a lot of important insights. And what we've learned is that, especially those students who make it to Berkeley, do so because they're always trying to show that they're more than their immigrant status. They're always trying to show this. In fact, Professor Aurora Chang writes about this process of being hyper-documented. And what that's about is earning award after award, accolade after accolade. A lot of these students do this. They work extra hard in order to show how they're more than just their immigration status. For me, I was always mystified because in 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act normalized our status, that interesting term, normalized our status. All of a sudden, we went from being undocumented to being residents and then eventually to being citizens. And by that time, I was at Berkeley. What was interesting is that one semester that I was undocumented, I was a B average student. When I became a resident, all of a sudden I became an A student. And I wonder why, all of a sudden I was mystified by that. I was always also, because of this experience, in 1986 you had about 3 million people who went through the amnesty process. Of those 3 million, about 40% eventually became citizens. They became Americans. And so what I always became curious about was, well, what happened to those stories? What happened to these stories of these Americans? In a way, being undocumented is a pre-American heritage. It's a story. And so where was it? And so in graduate school, I tried to study this because I had experienced it. I tried to study things like, for example, there's a story that I wrote about my sister who was always looking out the window, waiting for dad to get home. And I don't know if you see in this cartoon, but she was always afraid that he wasn't going to get home because he was, he had been caught, right? And so, you had that, in the family. I always wondered about, how little kids were socialized in this experience. I remember thinking, how do you talk to a little kid about living in a liminal moment, How do they grapple with that? And so I would draw cartoons about it. So I applied to go to graduate school after I finished my undergraduate program. And I was accepted in ethnic studies because I wanted to study particularly the way that undocumented immigrant experience was presented and represented in Mexican-American fiction. One of the things that I found was that being undocumented, even within that community, there was a hierarchy of status. There were some that had even more agency than others, right? That the story wasn't just a flat story of, being afraid all the time, that there was actually people who had talent, who actually, had larger voice, and then there were others who had no voice, right? And so even within that community, you had a hierarchy. And so I tried to focus on that and had a wonderful experience in graduate school reading all kinds of material. One of the things that really inspired me was Ralph Ellison's book, Invisible Man, and studying with Professor Barbara Christian on it. And as I finished my degree, I tried to engage my colleagues. So first was by writing a dissertation on the topic. Then I wrote some chapters on this issue, trying to invite dialogue to see, if we had this huge number of immigrants who are now part of our social milieu, let's engage them, right? And trying to get that dialogue going. I wrote also personal essays on this, essays about embracing this identity that, of course, is taboo. Essays about, how do you talk about internally, within the family? And even though I did all this work, generally there was little response. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that there wasn't a critical mass of colleagues, doing the same kind of work. It's different today. Today is very different. 10 years ago, we couldn't have this. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing this presentation. But today, there's a lot of stuff that's been happening. When I talk about, what did it feel like to be undocumented? I always think about this. I don't know how many of you followed the Occupy movement, but they wore those masks, right? And, wearing a mask, but one where you're always being suspected of something, right? And so I drew this cartoon around it. I, of course, draw cartoons focused on my influences. Now, what I should mention is that, these cartoons, where I get the feedback is on Facebook. That's where I share them. And I've known through Facebook that there's a lot of people, around the nation who are interested in talking about, these stories. These for me are, of course, very personal stories. Here's one that I drew, one of the first ones that I drew about an interaction with my dad, because my dad was always, be careful. You can do whatever you want to do as long as you're careful, And in this one, it's like, he used to say, well, no matter how good your English is, you can always be caught. I said, but I have a PhD. Doesn't matter, right? The family, talking about being undocumented is an issue, again, that is a taboo. And even within families, even though it's a shared experience, there's not a public conversation about it. And so here, I drew a cartoon where you see the internal conversation and not an external dialogue around it. The experience that I had in graduate school, I tried to incorporate into this work also by bringing in those things that I had read. So, for example, when I read about deconstruction, I realized that, wait a minute, I've been doing deconstruction ever since I was little. Because deconstruction is about looking at a phenomena, looking at the different parts and seeing how it works and critiquing it. Well, that's what I was trained to do as a little kid. And so I've always been concerned about this and kept journals, kept these journals, but I never really did much with them. I kept these at home, never really shared them. Even when I became a professor, I tried to initiate the conversation, but there was always that anxiety. I think you can see here in this image, being in front of a classroom, similar to right here, but also kind of having that back talk, in your mind, right? And eventually, here's another image that I did on that. Eventually, 14 years ago, a critical moment happened. My daughter Sophia was born. At that time, my wife was chief resident at the family practice program at UCSF, and she was going to be spending a year there. You have to be a resident, right? While I was teaching at Cal State Monterey Bay. And so we realized quickly that if we were going to raise our daughter directly, one of us had to make a sacrifice, because otherwise our daughter, given the nature of the work we were doing, was going to be raised by childcare. Especially if Leticia went over to Monterey with me, where there was no family locally. Here in East Oakland, we had both of our parents, my parents and Leticia's parents, who were eager to take care of this baby girl, right? And so I made the decision, at that point, to take a sabbatical, to take some years off, and focus on writing the great Mexican-American novel that would explore what being undocumented was about, right? And so that's what I tried to do. And in order to do that, I had to become a staff member. And for me, becoming a staff member was great, because there was a lot of opportunities. One of the best things that happened to me is I landed in my current position. I work at the Student Learning Center as a writing program coordinator. I get to talk about writing all the time. I get to teach. I work with eager students who want to learn. I talk with colleagues about writing. And sometimes, now and then, I get to work with students from East Oakland who also happen to be undocumented. And so you have that kind of full circle going. So one of the best things about working also in the SLC is that you get to teach in the summer. And 2 years ago, in teaching during the summer, I teach a Chicano history class. My students were taking the midterm. And, they had been complaining, as students during summer are wont to do, right? That there was too much work. They were reading, they had too much reading. But I was also paying attention to what was going on throughout the nation, where because of the DREAM Act, undocumented immigrant students had gone out, and they were actually doing a lot of public protests around it. And I wanted to make a connection. We had studied the Chicano civil rights movement to make a connection between those two things. But how would I do that without bringing in more reading, right? I didn't want them to read all the work that I had written already, because, that's a little bit too much. But I wanted to, in one of the lectures that I had left, to focus on it. And so while they're taking the midterm, in the middle of the midterm, I'm proctoring it, and I take one of the midterm handouts that I had given them, and on the back of it, I started to doodle. What is it that I want to teach them? And all of a sudden, I finished this doodle. This is what I drew. I'm actually going to fast forward to that because it's coming. There it goes. This is what I drew. A day in the life of a DreamX student. I wanted to have them, pay attention to it and then to discuss it critically. And so the next day, I took this home. The next day, I polished it up, brought it in, and began discussing it. And that complaint that I had about doing more reading, they started going out and doing research themselves on it. And the response that I thought I was going to get initially when I had written all those essays and book chapters, all of a sudden I started getting that response from the students and also from Facebook because I posted this up on Facebook. Now, I realized at that moment, wait a minute, why did it change? Well, cartoons did something here. What the cartoon did is it changed the perspective, it changed the frame. I basically was doing visual essays. I took a character, usually me, I focused on the time, I tried to define a space, and always presented a conflict. And of course, that creates a compelling story. But the nice thing about a cartoon is you can have both an omniscient narrator, and you can also have a first-person, experience. And so it created a lot of flexibility for me. So I started doing more cartoons. This is one of the first ones that I did. And, I'm getting friend requests all over the place because there were students, not just here at Berkeley, but throughout the country who were interested. All of a sudden, I started getting requests from online magazines, from immigrant activists who were seeing these cartoons shared by others and were curious about them. So I started just going mad and drawing a lot. That's where all of these came from. And I usually would draw at lunchtime. And during the day, I would do my work and really enjoy my work. But at lunchtime, you probably would find me in one of the local restaurants with my journal and a pencil, eating real fast and then drawing after that, And so I drew all these things. And, again, I realized, wow, it was just a matter of changing perspective. But what I had forgotten was that I had already learned this lesson. I had learned this lesson in high school, and I had forgotten that. I had been so focused on needing to change the world through my writing, through being an academic and being a creative writer, that I had forgotten that I had another skill, right? And so I had to remember, what happened in high school. And so I want to share that story, and I'll end with that story. So in high school, there was a teacher, Mrs. Wolf, who, unbeknownst to me, submitted my name for a competition for a scholarship to go to Washington, D.C. Now, remember, I'm still undocumented at this time. So she submitted my name for the scholarship, and there's a local competition. If you win it, then you go, right? And so in the local competition, I devised a strategy. What I decided to do was that I was going to go, I was going to be polite, but I was not going to answer any of the questions with any substance. I was going to do something like what Cantinflas did, right? I was going to play that role. And Cantinflas is this brilliant Mexican comic who was known for parodying people in power by sounding as if he was giving, this very sophisticated analysis, but he really wasn't saying anything, right? And he was making fun of the power structure. So I thought, I'm going to go to this competition, and I don't want Ms. Wolf to feel embarrassed by me. So I'm going to answer their questions, but really not answering the questions. I wanted to lose this competition. I was naive. I didn't realize that what the committee was looking for was someone who was diplomatic, right? Someone who would not upset any of the sides, right? And so here I am going, and I win the competition. And I can't say no, because if I say no, then that's a tacit admission that something's wrong, and Ms. Wolf probably will find out, that I was undocumented. So I was afraid. My dad was totally afraid. And so what he does, he says, look, if you're going to go, in order for you to blend in, let's go to the store. We went to Eastmont Mall at the time. There were department stores, and he bought me a suit. He bought me a black polyester pinstripe suit to take with me to Washington, D.C. And so when we get to Washington, we go all over the place. Of course, here's in the mall. We go to the Capitol. We go to the White House. We go to the Smithsonian. We go to the Supreme Court. Everywhere I'm dying. Everywhere I'm, just sweating like a pig, because I'm feeling at any moment it's going to happen, right? Now, I go in the second day. One of the places we go to is the FBI building. right? So we went to the FBI building, and, I keep thinking if anywhere I'm going to get caught, I'm going to get caught there, right? After all, this is the place that has the best detectives on earth, right? And so I'm going to get caught. And as I walk in, I notice that people are beginning to point at me. All over the place, all the guards, some of the people who are working there who are walking in with briefcases and purses, they turn towards me. There's this little wry smile, and they keep walking. And I'm thinking, they all know, I've been caught. And somebody's soon going to come to tell me that I'm going to get deported. And it's not just me. If I get deported, my whole family gets deported. And in a way, I kind of wanted it because it was so weighty. It was so stressful to have that experience. So my roommate, someone who I really didn't get along with, walks towards me. He has that smile on his face, and he leans towards my ear, and he's about to tell me something, and I think, he's the one that's going to tell me. And so what he says is, your zipper has been unzipped the whole day. Right? He says this. And sure enough, I look down, and again, I'm wearing this black suit, and it's like neon, right? Everybody can see it. And I fumble with the zipper so much that I actually break it. But I feel really good. Because in that moment, I realized that fear that I felt was in me. I had made up a lot of that fear in me. It was a psychological response to what I was living, the condition I was living in. And I realized that I could also choose not to feel the fear, right? And so, that day was great. All of a sudden I realized, well, wait a minute. Nobody's expecting someone undocumented to be in Washington, D.C. in this tour, right? And so I started doing a lot of drawings around that, when I realized that it is that subjectivity, that epistemology that few people understand. That's what I have to share. So I drew one about, an experience with my mom when she was almost caught and the policeman brought her to the house, and, we were like afraid. He was helping, right? But he was helping someone who was undocumented. I drew other images. Now, this is the message that I have to share. I'm just going to now kind of conclude. I think at Berkeley, now that we have, all this institutional change happening, one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to become more specialized. What I feel is that, there's also these talents that we have, and I think that we shouldn't neglect them. It's when you think outside the box that you can create new opportunities. And for me, that's what cartooning did. It allowed me to transcend those borders of the discipline that I had learned as a scholar. But it also showed me that there are new paths. And these paths are only made available if we trust those talents that we have. So I want to finish just with one last cartoon here. It's one that I drew about my mom. My mom has diabetes. And there was, unfortunately, a day a few years ago when she was having a diabetic attack, and paramedics came to East Oakland. She still lives in East Oakland, to help her. And again, they were going to take her to the hospital to get the treatment that she needed. And as they're leaving, as the paramedics who are in this very economically depressed part of East Oakland, as they're leaving, they noticed on the wall all these certificates, all these degrees, 2 doctoral degrees, 1 degree, master's from Harvard, all her kids graduated from Berkeley. And these are people from East Oakland, right, who were undocumented. And I think, I always wonder, well, how is it that happens, right? That's the story we need to hear. So thank you again for, yeah. I don't think we have time for questions, right? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Alberto.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you as a gift for all your hard work. And
Thank
we can
you.
answer a couple questions as they're getting set up. Does anybody have any questions? I can pass the mic.
If you have questions, become my friend on Facebook, and you can get answers there too. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Gilberto again.
Sure.
Thank you so much. All right, Devin Wicks. Can I tell him what I know about you?
Go right ahead.
All right,
Don't tell him everything, though.
Okay, I won't. Know what? Oh, okay. I won't tell you what I know about him then, but I will tell
darn.
you that
It's a big secret. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
he is the guy to listen to about goals. Devin is the Director of Fitness and Wellness Operations for the Department of Recreational Sports. Devin has toured nationally teaching and training fitness professionals, consulting on fitness and wellness programs, and he has worked with some of our best Cal athletes. We're very excited to have him here today to wrap up the hour for us. Thank you very much, Devin.
Thank you. Well, first off, I want to take a moment to say thank you to the staff who organized this event. I think it's really exciting and really important, and I'm also honored to have been selected to do this. So I want to thank you because I get to talk about one of the things that I really enjoy the most. And it's actually not about teaching a dog how to fetch, though I do spend a lot of time around that topic. So I know that when you saw that topic come up, you thought, are we going to play fetch today? And I'm not going to have you chasing balls down the hall. I know it would be fun for me, to be honest, but we're not going to do that. But it does illustrate something that I spend most of my time thinking about here on campus. As many of you know, I'm the Director of Fitness and Wellness Operations here on campus. And so I spend a lot of time trying to understand how to get people to do things to be healthier individuals. Whether it's exercise, stress management, nutrition. I get to sit in my office and try and devise ways to get people excited about this stuff, right? And one of the topics, or one of the areas that I spend most of my time on is behavior change. So I have a question for you. How many of you guys have ever tried to change a behavior? Whether it's eating healthy, exercising, maybe showing more gratitude, right? And I have a question for you as a follow-up question. Were you able to sustainably do that? Did it happen? Hands up if it happened. So I see a lot less hands. So I got some huhs, kind of, maybe a little bit. Well, that's what I get to spend my day thinking about and talking about is how do I make it happen and how do I make it stick? So in my job, obviously, I do a lot of fitness stuff. I was a personal trainer. I was an instructor. I do all kinds of things like that. And I bet you anything, I can predict what you guys think about trainers, right? What do we normally do? We always say things like, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. If we're not going to make you work hard, you're not going to see any change. You might even think that we might yell at you, right? Maybe this is us. You're sitting there as the poor person going, I want to just be healthy, and we're yelling at you really loud. Or maybe this is your image of a trainer, right? We've seen this person, unless you faint, puke, or die, keep working. That's a pretty exciting thing, right? That's a lot of motivation going on right there, yeah? I don't do that, don't worry. I'm not going to do it to you today. But what I would like to do is share with you a little story. And this story is about somebody who actually made a behavior change and didn't do it this way. This is a friend of mine. This friend right here, several years ago, weighed almost 200 pounds. And if you can't tell, that's actually me. Although it's awfully wide. Wow. That was me at my heaviest, all right? And I wasn't, in this picture, the person who was going to go to that personal trainer. I wasn't going to be the person to be yelled at. That wasn't going to motivate me to change. That wasn't going to get me to be in a place that's healthy and living a sustainably healthy lifestyle. This person right here, to kind of give you a little picture of his day, would go to school, do what he had to do, come home, sit down, turn on the TV, and start snacking. Go to bed, get up, and do it again. That was the day. That was this person right here. And not only was I young, so imagine being a young person with all the other things that are going on as you're trying to grow up and figure out the world, but I was also almost 300 pounds. Did I say 200? Almost 300 pounds. I was almost 100 pounds more than I am today. And so I finally got to a point where I got so frustrated that I became my own behavior change expert. All right? When you think about it, it's like, oh, okay, how do I play with this little game? I noticed a pattern that developed. And that pattern was, I would come home, I would sit down, I would turn the TV, had a clicker, didn't even have to change the channel. I could just sit there and go, click, and then start snacking, right? Well, what am I doing in that image? I'm sitting down, not moving, and I'm adding calories to my life. And so I decided one thing. I said, you know what, tomorrow, I'm not going to turn the TV on. I'm just going to go home. So I made a promise to myself, I'm not going to turn the TV on. And I got home, and I didn't turn the TV on, and I'm sitting there waiting for something to happen. So I start pacing a little bit more, get a little bored, decide to go out and do something. Well, that was kind of cool. I did something. I got up and moved a little bit, and I didn't eat. I didn't snack. Well, let me try that again. So I did it again. And gradually over the time, I started a behavior that led me to where I am today. All right? So I was able to actually kind of behavior change myself. So fast forward a few years and 100-pound weight loss. I've lost 100 pounds since that picture. And, thank you. And I'm facing now, thank you. The end of the talk, no. I'm now faced with trying to help people on this campus and in our community try and lead healthier lives. All right, so it's great and it's really exciting because I have so many opportunities with so many different people, but it's a little bit challenging. So as I'm working to create some new programming, we have this program called WorkFit and WorkFit U. Many of you may know that. If you don't, it's a campus program for faculty staff. And we start trying to come up with ideas. How can we really get change to be sustainable in people? And we come across some research by a researcher and a faculty member down at Stanford. His name is B.J. Fogg. And what B.J. Fogg does is he tries to understand how behavior change really occurs, and specifically how technology interplays with behaviors and how do you create sustainable behaviors. And in his model, he's been able to come up with some really exciting things. Here he is jumping over that's BJ right there. So much so that actually some of his students have gone on to do some amazing things. For example, one of his students is the co-founder of Instagram. Pretty exciting. It's a large company. He's also worked with eBay and Weight Watchers to help get people to do things. And in fact, in 2007, in one of his classes that he created for the students, he challenged them over the course of 10 weeks to come up with an app based on his behavior change model. By the end of that 10-week period, his students had engaged 16 million Facebook users. They actually engage in one of their programs. So something powerful going on here with what he's doing. And so when we saw this stuff, we decided, okay, there must be something here. And what I want to do is I want to teach you in 2 minutes or less what that model is. Because I think it's really important, both individually, if we're trying to change behaviors for ourselves, but more importantly, as we start looking to our family, to our friends, to our coworkers, or to the things that we do on this campus. Okay, so are you ready? It's a 2-minute test. Get your stopwatch ready. I'm going to try it. 2 minutes. Ready? All right. Here we go. So, listen carefully. A behavior occurs when 3 things happen simultaneously. When you have the motivation, the ability, and a trigger. A trigger is something that says, do it now. Hey, how are you? Hi. All right. What was the behavior? She shook the hands, right? What was the trigger? I extended my hand. I said, hey, I want to shake your hand. Did she have the motivation to do it? Yeah. She's in front of everybody. It's a little bit nervous. Someone walks up. She got some peer pressure going on there, right? Did she have the ability to do it? Yes. I walked right over. All right, so that's all that is. But to understand how these 3 things play together, I want to kind of take you through it with a little bit of a graph. Don't get too nervous. But on this axis right here, we're going to have something we call motivation. And in life, you can have high motivation to do something, or you can have low motivation to do something. And throughout our lives, it goes up and down over different things. All right? We also have ability across this axis right here. And in terms of ability, things can either be easy to do, or they can be hard to do. All right? Now what we really hope is, with the behavior that we're trying to engage, that the people are really highly motivated and it's really easy to do. So as soon as we trigger that behavior, it happens. But sometimes, and we find this a lot in our work world, we make things a little bit more complicated and people really aren't motivated to do it. And then we try and trigger them to do it. And it doesn't happen. And then we try and trigger again. And again. And again. And no matter how much we trigger, the behavior doesn't happen. So you can see this relationship happening right here between these 2 things. So the question is, how do we get from here to there? All right? Well, there's another part of this little graphic right here called an activation threshold. And the idea behind this activation threshold is, if you can change one of these elements to get that behavior to cross that line, you'll be successful. Now, I can always motivate you, and motivation is great for one-time things. Or I can look at how to make the thing that I want you to do easier to do, so that as soon as I motivate you, the behavior occurs. And this is where habits live. Habits live in this world right here. How'd I do? Close to 2 minutes? Nice. I've been practicing. So, and I'm a really big believer actually along the lines of practicing, of having people actually do this. So I want you guys here to join me. And for the people who are in the streaming audience, feel free to do this at your desk. Your coworkers are going to love you for it. So here's what I want you to do. I want everyone to stand up for me. This is audience participation. All right, I want you to raise your hands up, and I want you to say, I'm great. I'm great. And now I want you to do a victory dance. You get to make it up. Do your victory dance. All right, audience full of people doing victory dance. Now I want you to put them together. Ready? On the count of 3, you're going to say, I'm great, and you're going to do your victory dance. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm great. Nice. Okay, that's your motivation. We've got your motivation going on, right? Because you get to celebrate if you do this behavior. Now, I'm an exercise person, so I'm going to take it back to something I do a lot, exercise. But I'm going to make this really easy, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab your chair, and when I trigger you, I want you to do this. I want you to sit down, stand up, sit down, and stand up. All right? So let's just practice one time. Just practice. Ready? Sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up. What did I just make you do? Squats, exercise, right? Easy squats, right? Okay, now for the trigger part. Now, in our world, we have something that's actually extremely amazing. We have these devices that live in our world that trigger us all the time. And sort of the most common one is your phone. So here's your trigger. You're sitting at your desk, and your phone goes off. And what I want you to do when your phone goes off is I want you to do the behavior. So the trigger is going to be the phone. Ready? Phone's going to go off. And what are you going to do? Sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, and what? I'm great. Nice, nice. Okay, I want to try one more time. I want you to be well rehearsed. All right, in case my phone goes off during this presentation, you guys are going to be expected to do this. All right, one more time. Ready? So you're sitting at your desk, la-da-da, doing something, and all of a sudden, sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, and then what? I'm great. Nice. Oh, you can go ahead and sit back down again. That's all this is right here. It's a very simple behavior. Now let's talk really quickly through what happened. Did you have a trigger? Yeah, the trigger was what? The phone. All right. Did you have the motivation to do it? Yeah, kinda. I kind of prodded you a little bit, but you got to celebrate at the end, right? Could you say maybe you're excited about celebrating? That's a nice little motivational thing. I get to say, I'm great. How many times do you walk around during the day and say, I'm great? I do it a lot, actually. And did you have the ability to do it? Yeah. What if I had said there was a giant barbell with 350 pounds on it, and I wanted to do it then? Would you have been able to do that? No. What if I said, I'm going to pay you $100 right now to do it? Would you be able to do it? No, I couldn't motivate you to do it. Why? It's too hard. It's too hard. It wasn't anywhere in that ability thing. Is that right? Okay, well, that's the simple element of behavior change. And that can apply in all kinds of ways. So what I want to think about now is I want to think about just behaviors in general. A lot of us think there are all kinds of behaviors. But really, there are really only 15. And I don't want you to necessarily get lost in the graph. So just kind of close your eyes in the graph. All right? Because there's, on the top row, there's dot behaviors, those are one-time behaviors. And in the middle row, there are span behaviors, or behaviors that you start and stop doing. What I want to focus on is not here and not here, but I want to focus on this bottom one. These are your path behaviors. These are the things like I want to eat healthy. I want to exercise regularly. I want to have more gratitude. All right? And it's in this area right here that making things easy to do so that you can always be successful is really effective. When you're up here, in these top ones, that's where motivation works well. If there's a one-time event, and you want somebody to do that one-time thing, I'm going to pay you $100 to do it. It's only once. They're like, I can do that, right? But motivation kind of wears out as you start getting further down here into these behaviors. All right, and that's really where the healthy habits become. And so this is where the idea of teaching a dog to fetch kind of comes in for me. Or in this instance, we're going to talk a little bit about how dolphin trainers train dolphins. Do you guys know how they do that? You've seen dolphins jump over ropes, right? Okay, here's how they train dolphins. What they do is they put a piece of rope on the bottom of the pool. And whenever the dolphin swims past the rope, they say, congratulations, you get a fish. The dolphin's like, this is cool. I like this. I swim, I get a fish, right? Then the dolphin trainer does something else. They raise the rope. Not out of the water, just halfway up. And then the dolphin swims by underneath the rope and nothing happens. And then the dolphin swims over the rope and they go, yay, you get a fish, right? So then what happens is they go, okay, we're going to make this a little bit more challenging. We're going to take this up outside the water. And the dolphin's like, wait a minute, I have to go over the top of that thing to get that fish when they blow that whistle. All right, when that whistle blows, I'm going for it, right? So then the dolphin, they blow the whistle, the dolphin jumps over the rope, and they give him a fish. And now you've shaped a behavior. You've taken something very simple, just swimming across the bottom, you've rewarded it a little bit, and you've made it increasingly more challenging. The same thing happens right here, and I'm going to show you what happened with the dolphin. Are you ready? So, it was easy behavior, right? And you can apply your own behavior. You can think, I want to run. Well, start off by walking to the end of your to your driveway. Very simple behavior, easy to do. The next day, you do it again. The next day, you do it again. And the next day, you do it again. And what are you noticing that's happening right here? What's happening with the action? Is it getting easier or harder to do? Because you've done it many times. Could you imagine that if you were taking a walk to the end of your driveway and back? Are you getting a little bit more motivated or a little less motivated? A little more motivated because you can do this. So then what we do is we say, okay, let's make it a little bit more challenging. And then we continue to shape your behavior. Each time making it a little bit harder, but letting you just get just enough challenged so that you can still be successful, and eventually before long you're running 5Ks. And that's what I get to spend most of my time doing, is thinking about that. Thinking about how to get people to change. And it always comes down to sort of three things. Behavior occurs when there's a motivation, the ability, and a trigger. Pretty simple, right? Yes? No? So then what happens if you hear this again? What are you going to do? I'm going to stand up. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to stand up and then do what? Yay, I'm great. All right, you guys, thank you very much for letting me come out. Do you have any questions?
Yes, we have time for a couple questions.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellent.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I explained behavior change so well. Well, again, thank you guys very much, and hopefully you'll take a little piece of this home with you.
Thank you. So I just have a couple closing remarks. Obviously, want to appreciate all of our speakers today for taking time, and I'm glad to see faces in the room, and hopefully folks who are watching online were able to hear and see everything appropriately. With the permission of our speakers who we'll reach out to, we will be asking if we can add their PowerPoints to the Staff Appreciation website, so if any of you want to refer to those and forward them on. Also, the easiest way to find the website for the rest of the week, just search Staff Appreciation Week from the Berkeley homepage. It's the easiest way to find it. And so just a heads up about things the rest of the week. Tomorrow is Summerfest, and we have been told that Chancellor Dirks will be there to hand out T-shirts to those who get to the event soon enough. I don't know how many they're handing out, but if you want a chance to say hello, he is supposed to be there tomorrow. Friday, we will have our campus stroll at noon. Are you going to be there, Devin?
I will be there.
Okay. We're doing a campus tour. I mean, so many of us work here. We don't know the buildings we work around and all the cool facts, so we're going to actually have student ambassadors take us on a tour at noon, meeting at Westgate. And hopefully you take advantage of some of the rest of the perks this week. I got a chance to eat at Crossroads yesterday, which is the dining hall between Unit 1 and 2. It was $5 all you can eat, salad bar, all these things. And you get Pete's Coffee for free afterwards if you want. And there's free coffee every day. I'm not a coffee drinker, but if you are, keep that in mind. And 20% off at the student store. And last but not least, RSF is free all week. So if you want to take a class, try something out, through Sunday, you can use the RSF. So we'll stick around to answer a few questions. Otherwise, everything that was streamed is being recorded and will be posted on the website. So feel free to encourage others to watch. And hopefully this will become a new annual event to do some celebrating and appreciating for a whole week every year. So thanks so much.
Thank you.